Why, hello there, dear listener. I'm your host, Erwin Blackthorn, and this is the Dirty Lore House podcast, coming at you with all the deliciously nutty dirty lore. Today, we're going to be talking about alchemy. That's right. The thing that is outdated, isn't it? Nobody wants to talk about alchemy anymore. They want to talk about science, right? And you can't actually scientifically prove if a story works or doesn't, unless you statistically prove that it sells more or sells less. But can you actually alchemically determine if a story is good or bad? I mean, I guess not, because good and bad is still subjective in that sense, but you can alchemically determine if a story is purified or still needs to be more refined. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Whether it's a story or art or even your own life, alchemy is not an answer, but it is a useful tool. And that's what we're going to be teaching you today for about an hour, hopefully if I don't digress for too long. So alchemy, what's the basics of it? What do you need to know in order to become a better artist? Well, you need to know the basics of alchemy. So if you look up the definition of alchemy, you'll see that it's an ancient branch of natural philosophy. And it's a proto-scientific tradition that was historically practiced in China, India, Muslim world, and Europe. Well, geez, aren't those all the places that all the stories come from? We don't really get many Mayan stories now, do we? Not too many stories written down in North America, huh? What was the first story written down in North America? Paul Bunyan? So these places, they had alchemy. They also developed heavily. They did something correct, especially when it came down to art, because these were the most artistic places that you can find. How can you counter the beauty of some kind of Muslim mosque with all that's, what is that called? Mosaics and stuff. How can you counter chapels in the Renaissance? Chinese, what do the Chinese have? What do they have? Great Wall of China? Those temples and those little spires they have on their rooftops? Now here's the thing. In the East, they had one form of alchemy, and in the West, they had another. I'm going to try to discuss both of those because both are valid completely when it comes to art. So whenever somebody thinks of alchemy, the first thing they think of is, oh, the Philosopher's Stone. Oh, you're just trying to make the Magnum Opus, the great work. Oh, you're just trying to make, lead into gold, right? I mean, technically, but those are all just symbols. Those are all just ways that we communicate through alchemy. We just tell people, yeah, you can transform lead into gold, but we don't mean literal lead into literal gold. Although that's what previous alchemists meant because they were actually trying to do it, and lo and behold, it's actually possible technically through science, but not through alchemy, through science. But that's what I'm just trying to say. People think of one way when they think of alchemy, but it's actually something else, and I'm going to explain it. Sorry for trying to not lead you towards the right direction. Here, we're going back. Okay, we're reeling back in. Get that fish. So when it comes to alchemy, the main thing you have to remember is that the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Muslims, I believe even the ancient Egyptians, they believed in what was the four elements. The four elements are what everything in the world was consisted of. And this was, say along with me if you can, there was fire, air, water, and earth. And fucking magnets, how do they work? But then later on, somebody said, hey, what if there's aether? So aether was called a quintessence, I can't even say it, quintessence, right? And it was the part that filled the region of the universe beyond the terrestrial sphere. So beyond physical, there was something called aether. And this was, I guess you can consider it like a liquid that was beyond fire, and it was what they thought the space was made of. So you have the sun up in the sky, and they believe there was a sky, there was the ground, On the ground there was water surrounding the earth. Up in the sky there was fire, but it was surrounded by something as well. Well, what was it? It wasn't water, because water would have just fallen through, which it does when it rains. So what was it? And they figured, oh, maybe it's Aether. So it was an Aether sea surrounding the sun and the moon and the stars. But because the way that the sun and the stars and the moon looked, they believed these were made of fire, just pure fire. It's like it was light, because light was fire in those times. There was almost no difference between the two. How can you make a difference? When you had fire, you had light. When you had the sun, looks like it's on fire, you had light. Okay, both are the same, right? And that's how they thought in the ancient times. So this entire advice, it's going to be what's considered pre-modernist. So you're going to be thinking in a very old-fashioned way. It's no longer modernist. It's nowhere near postmodernist. It's pre-modernist. Before all these things. Before we had a reason. Before we had rationalism. We had reason, but before rationalism and logic was like put forth and scientific data and everything. Before all that, we had pre-modernism, and it was very religious. Very religious, very spiritual. You had to explain things that were not explainable without science. Okay, well, at the same time, the Chinese believed there was 5, but theirs were not actually elements. Chinese elements were actually phases. They were all the same thing. They were just based on the seasons because the world around them changed per season. And these 5 phases, they were called wuxing. There was wood, that meant for spring, and it was a period of growth, generated abundance. There was fire, which stood for summer. Earth was like a transitional period between summer and fall, and it's also considered as late summer, but it was basically this very stable moment. It was like the eye of the storm. It was like the most not too hot, not too cold time. Not much really grew, or I guess a lot of things grew at that time. So it's like this middle zone, right? The very middle. Then there's metal, which stood for fall. It was a period of harvesting. So when you were using tools to cut down, what did they do? They were pulling the rice out of the paddy fields. They were chopping the lumber, I guess. They were using their scythes and their sickles to cut down the wheat. And it also counts for dryness, because metal is supposed to be dry, but if it gets wet, it gets rusty, right? And then there's water, which stood for winter. And water meant winter because that was basically the time where you would see all the water in the air. Through snow, you would see a lot more rain, and you would have a lot of coldness. They felt like it was the air that was cold like a river, or cold like the ocean. So it's like, oh, there's a lot of water in the air, right? It's time of the water. Now, why am I explaining all these? Because these are going to be your tools for writing better. You're going to have to start thinking of the 5 phases. What are the 5 phases? Well, think back to when you started studying storytelling. What else has a 5 in there? Oh, that's right. Your plot. Your plot's going to have 5 points, a 5-point structure. Freytag's pyramid, if you will. Right? Isn't that how it works? You have exposition, rising action, the climax, the falling action, and then the denouncement. Right? That's what everyone's told. Where did this come from? Well, lo and behold, it came from the idea of 5 elements, or 5 phases. The Chinese 5 phases, what is it about? Wood, the spring, it's a period of growth. Then you have fire, summer. It's a period of things heating up, right? Just like the rising action. You have earth, which is the climax. This is the part where everything kind of cools down, but not too much because it hasn't actually ended yet. It's just like a little breath. A little breath. It's a little breath of fresh air, right? Then you have autumn, metal. This is a time where everything's happening, everything's being collected, all the plot lines are being gathered up and finalized. And then you have water and winter, right? You have the moment where everything goes back to the denouncement. The story ends. The year ends. Well, holy shit. If they're that close, why not study into it, right? So for your plot, you're going to want to look into Wuxing, the Chinese 5 phases, the 5 elements of China. And this is actually what kind of puzzles me about something like Avatar the Last Airbender. Why didn't they use the 5 elements instead of the 4? Because the 4 elements are supposed to be from Greece and Egypt. Isn't Avatar Last Airbender supposed to be like Chinese? I have no idea what it's about. I actually, I'm going to be revealing more about myself, my power level. I've never really watched Avatar The Last Airbender. I know it's a sin. I know everybody from Reddit and everybody from, I don't know, who else is like a fan? Tumblr? Right? All those people? Fuck them. Who the hell cares what they think? All of those people are going to be mad at me, right? Well, guess what? I don't care. Because maybe I know more about Chinese culture than they do. Have you ever thought of that, huh? Maybe I've been to China once. I have. China. Maybe I'm Chinese. You don't know. I mean, last time I said I'm not Chinese. If you look into the lore of the Dirty Lore House, you're going to find out I'm not actually Chinese. But let me tell you this. If I'm in a moment where I have to eat a cat or a dog, I'd go Chinese on their ass. If I'm in a moment where I'm on a... what do you call it? Like that's actually an interesting thought now that I'm thinking about it. Pause the actual podcast for a second. If you're in China and somebody tricked you into eating a cat or a dog by putting it into like a burger or a taco, would you spit it out? Would you throw it up? I don't know. That'd be a waste of good food. It's already dead. Does that make me a bad person because I wouldn't throw up food that I paid for? It's like in Mexico when they have beef tongue tacos. Like, who the hell wants to eat that? But they trick you and they put some hot salsa on there and they decorate it with all the celery and what do they put on there? Sauerkraut? What do they put on the taco in Mexico? Sour cream. That's the one I'm thinking about. Sorry, German. Sour cream. I don't know. I think I'd eat a beef tongue taco. Wouldn't you? Would you spit it up if it tasted good too? There you go. That's a question for you. What are you guys called? That's a question for you vegans out there trying to tell me what to do. Yeah, just imagine yourself. You eat something that you got tricked into eating to, and it tasted fucking delicious. You wouldn't spit it out. I know you folks. You wouldn't be like, oh, so philosophically, I have to spit it out. No, you wouldn't. Just like a Muslim eating bacon. You wouldn't spit the thing out. You would enjoy the fuck out of it. Well, that got dark. Back to, speaking of Muslims, let's go back into the Islamic world, where it came down to the 5 elements. Actually, surprisingly, just a little heads up, I think it was the Muslims. I'm not sure. It was either just Arabics in general or it was the Muslims. Forgive me if I get this wrong. But they didn't really have 4 elements. They had 3. They had fire for demons, air for like angels, and then earth for humans. And surprisingly enough, that actually does correlate with another part of Asian, like Chinese philosophy back then. What was it? I think it was heaven, man, and earth. Right? So they had a 3. And here's the thing. When you start looking into alchemy, don't get wrapped up into things that are individual names. Never get wrapped up into the names. Each individual name in alchemy is just a symbol. It's just an idea. It's just a way for them to correlate to the concept, the actual form of it. Because alchemy is idealistic. We don't have, or you can even say it's monistic, but depending on who you are. If you're going from the Greek side, you're going to say it's idealistic because they weren't actually monistic, they were polytheists back in the Greek days. Same for the Egyptians, right? Same for the Indians. India is a weird one. I forgot what the term is, but it's not polytheistic, it's something else, because they have one god, but that god, through emanation, they go down, and split up. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but emanation is very important for when you want to think of alchemy and think of your own story. You want to think of one single main thing that branches downwards and connects everything upwards. And you're going to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. I think you can skip 6 because I don't really know of anything that's important from 6, but then you go to 7, and then you skip everything in the middle there, and then you go to 12. Unless you really want to think about like what could be 8 or 9 or 10. But those ones, they're already answered from the ones above. So what's number 1 when it comes to art? Number 1 is you. You're the artist. You're the creator. You're the monotheistic god of the whole thing. You're the one in charge. You're the head honcho. You're the big cheese, right? You're the one the entire project depends on, because without you, it's not there. It's not created. So you're the god. You're the main thing that keeps it all together. Okay, so what do you have to do under that? What do you have that's under you? You have 2 things that are under you. And this one's going to kind of wow you. What can you think of that's a dichotomy? Well, when it comes down to humans, we have a dichotomy of humans. Male and female, right? Man and woman. When it comes to the world outside, what do we have? We have hot and cold, right? We have light and darkness. But throughout all of this, everything, we have order and we have chaos. And in the world of the ancient times, a human would look outwards into the horizon. Horizon's a split, right, between the sky and the earth. And they would go, how does that happen? How can we explain this? Well, what happens is that most people believed in a sky father because the father was above. The father was air and sun, fire. Air and fire made the order. What made the earth? Well, that was water and earth. You had ground and you had the ocean, you had rivers all on the ground. Now, what was interesting is that water would go up into the sky to make rain. Usually people liked that because when you had rain, you got nourishment. You had this harvest you were able to get because you got rain. You had water going to the fields. You had trees pop up, right? That water was considered life. And earth was considered the fertile land. Alright, so think about that one for a second. While I continue to yammer on, think about that one. How does this relate to art, right? So the Sky Father, he was air and he was fire. The fire was illumination. It allowed you to see. It enlightened you. The air allowed you to breathe. It was so important for air that the Chinese considered it beyond these four. They had 5 phases, right? They didn't have air as a phase. If you notice that one, it wasn't there. Instead, they called it qi, which was just life. Qi meant vapor, air, breath. It's also translated to vital energy or material energy or just simply energy. It was the stuff that made everything move, and they figured that out because if you saw the wind, it moved things, right? Well, that's pretty fucking amazing when you're somebody who doesn't know science yet. You're like, well, how is this thing moving? Is it a ghost? Is there like this world phantom moving everything? No, that's just the life force around you. So they believe that you can harness this life force, and then in Chinese, Indian, Japanese, I guess you can consider it medicine. And they believed in these nodes on the body that were, what do they call it? I guess they're just called pressure points. I could have sworn there's another name for them. Oh well. You have the Sky Father and you have the Earth Mother. Well, in the East, they had what was called yin and yang. It was white and black. And these two things work together. And when you want to think of yin and yang, you can think of any dynamic duo, or even like a hero versus their arch nemesis, right? Batman and the Joker. Batman is order, Joker is chaos. So yin was the feminine, passive, negative form. And then yang was the positive, active, male form. So everything that was positive was yang, and everything that's negative is yin. And when we say negative, we don't mean like bad, alright? It's not like everything that was bad was feminine. A lot of feminists, they consider this like sexist, and like it just instantly creates things to be bad for women because they're seen as bad. No, negative doesn't mean bad. Too much yang or too much yin can be bad, alright? Oh, so you had air, that was essential just to life itself. You had fire, which was essential to life itself. And these people knew it. They knew that you couldn't really grow things in darkness. If you did, the tree would try to grow very tall in order to gain any light. I think you can grow some plants in darkness, but it goes for infrared, and then so the plant turns like blood red. I think that's what I remember. It sounds pretty cool too. Like just imagine like all these red flowers everywhere because it's dark. And then of course naturally there's mushrooms that grow in caves and they glow in the dark and all this other nonsense. You know, it's not like it's impossible, but when it comes to light, we're able to see. And it wasn't easy to live in that kind of world, ancient world I'm talking about, you know, time before we had electricity. What did we have? We had fire. Hell, the Nordic people, they had to piss on mushrooms just to get a fire going. You don't believe me? They had to do this crazy shit. They had to do, what was it? They had like some kind of mushroom and they like smashed it down, and then they'll turn it into like a foil, and they'll like take a piece of like this mushroom foil and they'll piss on it and they'll like smash it with a hammer and it would make a fire. Who the hell thought of that? Who found that out? By accident? That's some deep shit. But so you're in this world where there's no fire, unless you really, really try hard to make it. So if you're at nighttime, that's when all the predators come, right? That's when all the evil comes out. People attack you at night. The predators come at night. Your sleepiness comes at night. That was actually a big thing. Back in the day, they didn't understand what sleep meant. They didn't know that we had to rest or anything. Sleep was a spirit. Sleep was like a demon. It was a lazy demon. It was a sloth, you know? They didn't like it, unless they really enjoyed it. But sleeping too much, you know, you can go retarded. And to make things even worse, they didn't even have coffee. Or did they? I think the Native Americans had coffee. That's why they're all cracked out. You think I'm kidding? They were on cocaine. They were on cocaine and marijuana. They were, what that's called? Fireball? Oh, that was called a speedball, and I got it wrong. It was with heroin and cocaine, but you know what I mean. They were up and down all around, and they did nothing. They couldn't even read. So, I was not trying to discredit them, because animism from the Americas, oh my god, it's beautiful, right? But, you know, just remember, these people didn't really write many stories. So you have the four elements, making up two, what do they call them? I think they call them primordial, no, what was it? Primal entities? I think that's what they call them. I mean, technically they're secondary when it comes to alchemy, but you have the first one, that's you, that's God. These two that are below it, chaos and order. What is that? What can you imagine as chaos and order in your own writing, or in your own art, or in your game, or whatever? Chaos is the creativity aspect. Order is your structure. You need to have order in your story. You need to have chaos in your story. You can't just be all order, or else everything's predictable. You can't just have all chaos, or else nobody knows what the hell you're saying. So you need a mix of both, and yin yang, make it even. Even mix of chaos, even mix of order, boom, you're in a sweet spot. Now the sweet spot is where humans lie, right? So because there's this kind of middle zone, you have one side, another side, and a middle. You have the past, the present, and the future. And that's when you also get the 3 proto-materia, which are sulfur, mercury, and salt. And it's a little bit difficult sometimes because salt is actually a mixture of sulfur and mercury, but when we're talking about these, we're not talking about the actual elements. But the history of that is because you would have sulfur. Stinky, rotten egg sulfur. It blows up. It's really reactive to energy. It's literally a time bomb. So when you had sulfur, they were like, oh shit, this is like a rock of fire. This is like brimstone. This is like something from another world because of how reactive it is. Who the hell would think that a rock's gonna do that? Imagine the poor bastard that kicked the first sulfur rock after trying to walk down the street, kicks a rock, accidentally kicks a sulfur rock, blows his fucking toes off. His foot banana peels. Just imagine the expression on his face. But then we had mercury. And mercury is what you can consider as a liquid metal. So it's fluid. Mercury was chaos. Straight up chaos. You wanna know why? Because mercury poisoning causes insanity. And people were going insane all over the place when they dealt with mercury. Alchemists were going insane because they were dealing with mercury. So if you consumed it, which was very common because, how often can you wash your hands as an alchemist? So you get mercury on your hands, start licking your fingers, sucking your thumb, whatever you do. And, let's see, you'd be itching, burning, pain, sensation resembling small insects crawling under your skin discoloration, you had swelling, desquamation, what the fuck, shedding or peeling of skin, that sounds horrible. Oh my goodness. You'd be sweating, you'd be having your heart rate increase, and you'd have hypertension with high blood pressure. Oh my goodness, that sounds horrible. Oh, and then later on, in the 18th and 20th century, they considered mercury poisoning as Mad Hatter disease. And this is because the people who were making hats back then, they were constantly dealing with mercury. And this is also kind of where they got the term Mad Hatter for Alice in Wonderland. So remember, when we talk about art, you really do have to remember what art is about. It's about the world around you. You have symbolism, yes, and you can make a story from your imagination, sure, but how does this relate to the reader? Alice in Wonderland was an amazing story. Everybody remembers it once they hear about it. Why do you think that is? Because everybody relates to it. It's highly relatable. I mean, everybody fears going insane. Everyone fears this world where... I mean, even if you don't know what a Mad Hatter is, you can still kind of relate to the idea of some guy with a bunch of hats going crazy. Things like Peter Pan, well, I'm starting to talk about modernist stuff, but even these stories are revolving around the alchemical process. Even some postmodernist stories can do it. Not very likely, but even they can do it by accident, by proxy, So that's 3. You had sulfur, mercury. Oh, I'm sorry. You had also salt. So salt was human. It was the most earth kind of thing you can have. Salt is also in water, salt water. So the world that was of Mother Earth, the Earth Mother, that was like salt. Mercury, so that was the Earth Mother. So that was body, right? The physical realm. And then you have mercury, which affected you mentally. It was fluid, it was shiny, it wasn't really able to become metal, even though it's supposed to be. And this was considered mental, the mental realm, the realm in your brain. It was the fluid of thought, right? And then you had sulfur, which was the spirit, because it related to fire, which related to God, which was above, up in the ethers, right? And it was like that because sulfur would be deposited. There would be residue anytime lightning struck. So if you saw a lightning strike, and at the source of it, like the place where it hit, You saw sulfur, you'd be like, what the fuck? Who the fuck put this here? Guess what? It was the gods, the god who struck the lightning downwards from heaven. They put the sulfur there, according to these ancient alchemists, right? And people didn't know what to think of that, other than, oh, okay, sulfur, gift from God, I guess. Don't kick it or else it's gonna fucking explode on you too. It's like a secondary lightning strike. Just imagine the face of the poor bastard who made gunpowder or got shot by the first gun. They're like, wait a minute, this wasn't part of the deal. When'd you get that thing? Oh my goodness. That must have been scary back then, being blown up by random shit. Some guy throws a yellow rock at you. Oh, what's that gonna do? And then you just explode. It blows you back, your ears are ringing. You're like Tom Cruise. No, what's his name? Tom Hanks and Saving Private Ryan. You have that face that like the lights are on but no one's home. So how does this apply to storytelling? Well, you do have a lot of triplets in your story. You have the primary marketing, which is the title, the cover, and the blurb. You also have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And you also have a beginning, middle, and end. You know, you kind of have to. You have the past, present, and future. That's 3. What else is there? That's 3. Oh, yes. I almost forgot to tell you this one. You also have what the writer was thinking, what the writer wrote, you know, the finished product, and then you have what the reader read. And these are 3 different entities. So you have the writer, the actual product, the medium, and then you have the reader, the one who's the audience, the one who's experiencing the art, right? So how does that happen? Well, check this one out. Your ideas are not yours. I mean, they are yours because you translated them into your head, but the idea came from somewhere else. And if you are Jungian, you're going to think that the idea came from the collective unconsciousness. This is something that's been before humans. It's something that relates to all of us, everything in the universe. Probably even things beyond the universe if we can understand them. But, you know, all we can understand from the universe is what we can perceive. And we have a physical perception, you know, our senses, and we have a mental perception, which is our thoughts, our ideas. What can we gain? What can we take that's not a human concept? Currently, we can't do that because we're human. We can only understand things in human concepts. I don't think anybody can disagree with that. Not even the postmodernists can disagree with that because they think that everything's a social construct, right? So we have human concepts, but I guess no, maybe they'll probably find a way to disagree. They'll be like, what's a human then? So, you know, go ahead and, you know, fuck them, right? Now, sometimes a writer or an artist, they're not going to understand what the reader or the audience is going to comprehend. And this is what Wittgenstein talks about in his concepts of language. Because one person's thinking of one thing, then they have to translate that into communication. And then the other person, the other subject, they're going to translate that and then put it into their brain. And then at that point, it's basically Chinese whispers, right? It's just a game of telephone. How much static between the two of you is going to determine how much different the end message is going to be. So that's why a lot of people, they don't like particular stories or particular art forms, particular pieces of art. They're not on the same wavelength. They're not thinking the same way. There's too much static between the two, between the artist and the audience, right? So how do you refine that? Well, the goal isn't to refine it so that everybody can understand your message. The goal is to make it so that specific people that you're aiming your art towards, they're going to be able to understand your message. Just how if you're making food, a dog's going to prefer a particular kind of food more than a human would, or, you know, mouse or an ant, you know, something else. You're not going to make food for everything. What is that? Air? Air and water? Is that? That's what Disney's trying to do. That's all you're going to be giving people. You're going to be giving them basic air, water, dirt, and I guess some kind of warmth. Because, fire is going to be around no matter what. Fire is another word for warmth, another word for light. So no matter what, you're going to have some kind of light, or else, there is no meaning to the word darkness. There's no meaning to the word darkness if there is no light, because there's nothing to compare it with. Oh, so how do you actually translate this? What's the process? Well, in your head, as the artist, you have an idea that comes from pretty much basically the aethers, right? The aethers. It comes from gods, comes from spirits, the muse, whatever you want to call it. Culture before you, ideas before you, history before you, whatever the fuck you want to believe in. It came from something outside of you. It's not your idea, someone else's. And it's not theirs either, it's something else's. Ideas are just conglomerations of symbols and subjects that got gathered together. And this is the opposite of refining. This is, it's a crudeness. So it becomes crude. It becomes the opposite of refined as more ideas get gathered up. As more culture gets put into it, it becomes more crude. So it's not refined at all. And this is why a lot of ideas now that are postmodernist, that they focus on culture, sure, they can focus on a particular group, but how much does that group even care about things in that particular group? I mean, a good example is like how TV shows these days, they always show like, people talking in slang. So like anybody outside of that slang, they're not going to really understand what's being said. And then another culture, another language has to put in their own slang to make it even understandable. A language and symbols is the same thing. Language is just a spoken or written form of symbols. When you have like a letter, that's a symbol. Number, that's a symbol. Right? A word, it just creates a symbol in your head. And that's the power of words, because if you have a word and somebody says it to you, there's no way to escape the symbol appearing in your head. Like if I say cock or pussy, you're going to think of the word at least in your head. It's going to go through no matter what if you hear it, right? And if you know what I'm talking about, you're going to get something similar in your head. At least a picture, right? So that's the thing. You can't control the symbol. The symbol controls you. The symbol's beyond you. And you're getting the idea from something else. You're understanding what I'm telling you because of the culture that we share, the language that we share, the human concepts that we share. Because every human knows what it's, I'm pretty sure a human with a cock knows what the cock looks like, right? Human with the pussy knows what the pussy looks like? Or actually, no. Yeah, I don't think they do. unless they got a mirror or something to look at it, or they stretch it upwards. Well, bad example, but you know what I'm talking about. These symbols are beyond you. They're from the aether. They're from the collective unconsciousness. And so when you are an artist, you're taking these ideas from the aether and you enlighten it with fire. The brightness. Woo, it's making a brightness and it's signaling out the single idea from the aether. It's infinite, or whatever we can assume is the most amount of ideas possible up there in the aethers that we can gather from our limited human concepts. And then the fire signals one out. Imagine it like the stars in the sky, or if it's a big idea, it's going to be like the sun. So you take out a single star, boom, take it in, and then you drop it downwards into the air. The air is the center of your thoughts, your thought process. You're thinking about it, right? It's up in... I don't know if anybody else does it, but whenever you're thinking of something, does it like kind of appear above your head? Like above where your eyes are? I mean, you don't really think of it like below your head, like in your mouth or something, do you? Or it's like behind your head, isn't it? Either way, that's like the air of your world, of your mental thought process as an artist. So that's the air, the empty space. But it's like the sky. And through the Sky Father, you gather up the wisdom and the intelligence to refine it into an actual thought that you can think of. Because the Sky Father represents wisdom and intelligence. It represents guidance and morals. It's the brain of the operation. right? And then you have to drop that idea through you. You have to make it slide through your body, from your thought process, from your brain, into your motor functions, right? That's how you make art come out. You have to say it. You have to write it. You have to draw it. You have to play it. You have to program it. So you have to use something, some kind of medium, right? But you don't get to the medium yet. You have to use some kind of motor function or some kind of process in order to bring it out of your head into the world. That's water. That's the cloud that brings down rain. And that's also the ocean surrounding the earth. So what is the ocean surrounding the earth? Actually, no. I'm going to get to the earth part first. Sorry about that. So the earth is the medium that you draw it into, that you write it into, that you're playing it into, the instrument. It's the tool. It's the product. The media that's birthed from your medium. It's the media that's in the form of the medium you're using, right? Now that sounds confusing, but that's the way the words are. It's the media you made. That's Earth. That's the fertility. That's where the ideas can grow from into somebody else, into the audience. So you have your media, your product. That's Earth. And it's surrounded by an ocean of salty water. What do you think the salty water is? Human concepts grounded. Culture. Ideas from other people. Not the ideas in your work, but ideas that relate to your work. Think of this ocean surrounding your island of a product as the market. Okay, it's not that difficult to think of it this way, because all you're imagining is just the sky, the stars up in the sky, and then the air, cloudy sky part, and then you imagine the earth and the water around it, right? I think that's a pretty simple picture to paint. Pun intended. And that's how you have to think of your art when you're creating it. It's not you that's creating it. I mean, you are processing it, but you're not the one who created the idea. You just created the thought. And the idea is way before you. Way before you. You just refined it or made it more crude through your brain process, through your own personal wisdom. Because you are a funnel that it's being siphoned through. It's this big amorphous blob, like a cloud, like a vapor. And then it narrows down into you. That's a funnel. And then through your motor functions, it gets turned into medium. That's a solid brick, right? It's a solid piece. It's physical. It's in the world now. It's out there. And now people can see it. And then when the audience sees that, they go backwards from that process. They go from Earth towards, they go from Earth, that's the product, towards water, that's their perception. So they're going to use one of their 5 senses to determine what it is. And some people only want to use one. So it's almost like some people, in order to please them, it's like you're trying to please the 5 blind men that try to touch a different part of the elephant. Or, there's this game called the King's Quest 6 where there's a part where you have these gnomes and each one has like a different giant body part. And so like one had giant hands, one had a giant nose, another one had giant ears, another one had giant eyes. And you pretty much trick them all into thinking that you're a different thing just based on like their focused perception. I think I missed one. Oh, one had a giant mouth, like a giant tongue. So your character, he's like giving them different bits of like items. And they would think it's a different thing every time. Even though it's the same man, he's just giving them a different thing every time because they had different perception. And that's how you have to deal with your audience when it comes to the water phase. But then their water phase, that's going through their perception, goes into their thoughts. What they think of the story, what they think of the food, what they think of the music. And then what's interesting is that these then get turned into fire. So it goes from their brain, boom, back out into the collective unconsciousness. Or it gets burned into a memory. Now think of it like this. how much from media do you actually remember? And why do you remember it? What's the attachment to it? Why did it make you remember it? It didn't happen in real life, so why do you remember it? That's the trick of media. It makes you remember things that never actually happened to you. You just remember it from the story. You never saw it. You saw it in your head. If you read a book, you saw it in your head. If you watched a movie, you saw it technically just in your head. It didn't happen in front of you, like actually happened in front of you. Play a game, you never actually lived in that world. It was all in your head. But it gave you a memory anyway. Oh. You feel the gears cranking, don't you? That's how you have to look at storytelling in an alchemical way. Now, the 4 elements in storytelling, the actual telling of it is a little bit different. Because it doesn't involve the process of somebody experiencing it or thinking of it. It's in the actual story. The fire, the air, the water, and the earth. Water and the earth, what can you really do? Earth feels like it's the setting, right? The setting's really important in the story. Because when you have a setting, you're telling the reader where it happens. And then the water is the plot itself, the story itself, the narrative. Do you know why it's water? Because it flows. The water flows, usually in a single direction. Sometimes it's all over the place, but it flows forward. It flows from one point to the other, from A to B. And if you have 3 points, if you have a beginning, middle, and end, you have A, B, and C. And throughout your plot, it has the 5 points, the 5 Chinese symbol face, 5 Chinese phases, the whooshing. You go from A to E, right? And then the air, what can you think of the air? What does the air make you think of? Well, the air can be 2 things. I'm pretty damn sure it's tone. Because tone's very important. Telling the reader how to think. Showing them your wisdom. Showing them your sky father. That sounds dirty, but showing them your sky father. You're showing them what you think of your own story. What you think of your own food. What you think of your own music. Your tone is important, no matter what art you're making. Your direction, your intention, your philosophy behind it. That's the art. That's the aesthetic. I guess you can say aesthetic then. Aesthetic is definitely air. Think of it like air aesthetic, right? Earth might as well be your medium itself. But in storytelling, it would be setting. But air is still definitely aesthetic. Water is definitely your progression. How you flow from A to B. And fire is your symbolism, your theme. The thing that keeps it all together and the thing that enlightens the entire situation so that the audience can see what you're doing, can see what you're trying to say. Your main message. The main feel to it all. That's your fire. And the quintessence, the 5th element, that's what keeps it all together. And I think we can consider that as the genre. The thing that not only considers it a specific thing, a specific form, but also the thing that can connect it to culture itself. The essence that can connect it to other elements from other people's works. It's a thing that keeps it all together. And that is part of culture, part of genre, part of communication. I guess you even consider it cybernetics as well. If you want to get really technical, that's thinking too far big. But as you can see, art is alchemical, especially writing. Especially anything that needs this kind of thought process. You can't escape it. It's going to be there whether you like it or not. It's not that you want to make it alchemical or it's better if you do. It's that you have to accept that there's alchemy involved in there. Just simply from the 4 elements being involved. The 3 proto-materia being involved. The 2 dichotomies, or what do you call it? The 2 primordial entities, the order and the chaos around it. And then you as the artist. You can't escape it. You can't deny it after learning that. You can't come from that and go, oh, wait a minute, maybe that was all bullshit. No, it's too intentional. It's too programmed. There is an order to it. Some people believe that art is all chaos, that's all emotion. It's all gonna be whatever you feel. Whatever I feel, man. I'm gonna do whatever I feel. Just let it flow through you. Well, you know what? Maybe it's not flowing through you. Maybe it's also flowing through somebody else. Maybe you're not that special. You just haven't met the same person that can do the same thing you can. Say the same thing you can. They're most likely saying the same thing, just in a different way. You ever think of that? You ever think that maybe your story is the same thing as somebody else's? Who the hell says your idea is original? It's not. You know why? Because you were influenced by the culture around you. You were influenced by the people before you. Whether or not you understand there's an actual aesthetic to it or a philosophy behind it, somebody else already made it. You're just making your own subversion of it. Your own subsect. Your own little additions. And that's what makes it special. That's what makes it you. You're taking all these things that have already been done, and all you're doing is just making a specific combination of it at a specific time from a specific person. That's not to say that you're not being creative. It's the exact opposite. You're incredibly creative when you're making art. Especially if it's something that you're learning on the way. If you're learning about yourself. That's important. I wouldn't dare to say don't learn about yourself when you're making art. Don't learn more about how you feel about certain things. When it comes to art, your feelings do matter because art is the feeling aspect. It's the chaos. But then what comes as the order to contradict this art? Well, that's the craft of it all. That's what they call it, arts and crafts. They don't just say art or craft. It's arts and craft. It's chaos and order. So you need to know the process of order in order to make it have any sense to it. While the art aspect is all chaos. It's just the emotional aspect. That's why people don't like postmodernist art. It's all chaos. There's no order to it. And they go, that's the beauty of it. Well, says who? You? The one who isn't actually making anything other than whatever some millionaire wants to buy to hide their drug money? Huh? You think we don't know? Maybe I should explain what order and chaos is better. Maybe I should explain what the 3 proto-materias are better. And maybe I should explain the 4 classical elements better and the 5 Chinese phases better. But I think that's a perfect introduction to the whole entire thing. Also, I don't want to teach too much because, well, A, I would have to look into it more to say it like a free-form way. And B, I mean, this is a lot to take in. This is something I took in over a long period of time. And I had the help of Jordan Peterson, because Jordan Peterson was talking about this in one of his lectures. I forgot which one it was. Sorry about that. But he did explain the whole, how there was like I think it was Mesopotamians, and their concept of the earth was like, there's primordial waters below, there's the ocean above that, there's the earth that's like a little island, there's a sky, and then there's like the stars, and there is firmament that's like above the sun, and this separates our world from heaven. I'm pretty damn sure that's the Old Testament. So second half of this one. How do you actually make an alchemical process in your storytelling? Well, check this out. This is going to make you freak out. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to make you blow your load. And if it doesn't blow your load, I'm going to blow my load anyway. Now, remember when I mentioned the Magnum Opus before? And then like everybody rewinds it and they're like looking for it. And then like, see, I did say that. So, Magnum Opus is the great work in alchemy. And it's working with prima materia. And they do this to create the Philosopher's Stone. So what does this all mean? Well, this is all symbolism. The great work is simply your work. Your work is great, right? You're making the great work. It's yours. It's great. It's a product that you created. you have to process it with the prima materia, the prime matter, the first matter. Now, it doesn't matter what you believe came first, if it was chaos or order or whatever. Usually when it comes to Greek mythology, it's chaos that came first and order came from it. The gods were spewed out from the primordial chaos, this void. They were spewed out from it, right? So chaos first, order second. Which is the same thing as saying emotion first, logic second. Creativity first, structure second. Right? That's how Greek works were made. That's how Greek mythology was made. That's how the Iliad was made. Creativity first, and then structure second. They spewed out all of their ideas, everything, all over the place. And then they refined it afterwards. What does this remind you of, When it comes to writing, what does that remind you of? Does that remind you of a rough draft being made? Somebody just spewing out whatever they can from their ideas, from the thoughts in their head, making whatever they can, putting whatever they can into it, and then afterwards they edit it and they proofread, have other people read it. What is that process? How refined are you in that process? Well, think of it like this. In the Magnum Opus, there are 4 stages. All right, when it comes to making the Philosopher's Stone. Oh, crazy thing also. So, in Harry Potter, when he gets the Philosopher's Stone, what color was it? What color was that stone? What color are elixirs of life? Potions, health potions in games. Think of that for a second. Why is a health potion red? Huh? Why was a Philosopher's Stone in the store in the book? I think it was in the book as well, but in the movie, pure bright red. Right? Why do you think that was? Also in Casper, they had that elixir of life. It was red in there too, right? Why does that stick with us so well? That's iconic. Well, there was the 4 stages of the Magnum Opus in order to make the Philosopher's Stone. There's Negrito as the first one. Alright, stop laughing. And YouTube, don't ban me because this is an alchemical word. Negrito, okay? Okay, YouTube, I'm using an alchemy word. Negrito, okay? And that was Latin for the blackening. The blackening. Or melanosis. Melanosis is the Greek form of that word because melon in Greek is black. In Negrito, the matter that you're going to be using is, you can consider it decomposed. It's like something died. Stinky, smells awful, raw. So here's the thing. You might notice some of these terms because this is the terms that Jung used when he was explaining psychology. He considered Negrito as the dark night of the soul, where an individual confronts the shadow within. The shadow was the ultimate evil, the ultimate chaos within yourself. You know, the outside of you, the light within you, the enlightenment, that was the order. That was you trying to control yourself. The shadow was the chaos within, the part of you that can't control itself, all the bad stuff about yourself, the negative stuff. Right? It might not even be considered bad, it's just bad to you as an individual. Because these are the things you want to keep inside, away from society. So this was Negrito. This is the stuff that you don't want people to see. This is your rough draft. You don't want people to see your rough draft. This is the garbage moment of the great work. This is the part that is dead, useless, or decomposed. What do you think decompose is about? Well, imagine a human body and they died, right? What happens? The human had a life, they died. It's lifeless. There's nothing happening. Lights are on and no one's home. No, sorry. The lights are off and no one's home, right? It's still there. It's still a physical being, but it's dead. And then it starts to decompose, starts to rot. So you have these bacteria that they start to take the little bits and pieces of your body, start eating your balls, your ass, whatever. Start eating your poo, start your tummy. and you start to rot away. And your skin turns black, like like when you have frostbite or when... I don't mean it in the way that you're probably thinking, alright? It's not that... Not trying to compare it to any particular people, alright? Just that your skin does turn black when it starts to rot, because that's what happens when bacteria eats it. Also, certain people, when they're rotting in prison, they look that way, okay? Oh, that's terrible. So you have Negrito as the blackening. The raw, rough draft. The concepts, they're decaying, bacteria is trying to eat it. This is when your brain is trying to get the ideas up from the god, muse, stars, whatever you want to call it, culture. It's trying to decompose it into your brain. Well, the second stage is albedo. Alright, it's the whitening. Also known as Leosius. I can't say it. I'm not going to try to say the Greek word. I can say melanosis, but I cannot say leucosis? Well, either way, leucosis, whatever the fuck it is, it means white, alright? Just understand that the other word is just a Greek form of it. The osis is like, what's that thing called? Osmosis. It's like the process. That's what osis is, basically. Well, let me make sure. I don't want to sound ignorant when it comes to Greek. Osis means state or abnormal condition, so the state of white. The white state. Oh, that sounds beautiful, doesn't it? So, nigrido is the black state. Albedo is the white state. Or you can consider it stage. So, when there's a petrification, then there's a purification, which is albedo. Right? When you see a dead body, you have the skin decay into a black form, like a black goo. Like, have you ever seen a dead body like lying in the ground for a couple days? It turns into like a goo, doesn't it? It turns into like a slime, like a green, black kind of goo. So after that, you have the bones left of the body, the bare bones of it. Boom. That's what you gotta think of it. The bones of it are what your brain concocts as an idea that you're then going to be able to flow through your body into your work, right? But you have to have the idea of it, the basic bare bones of it. The symbol, the form, the single core concept of it, the element, the structure. This is where structure starts setting in. So first there was chaos, then there's order. The bones are your order of your body, because if you didn't have your bones, you'd be what? Like an octopus. You'd just be this blob on the ground. You'd be like Peter Griffin in that one episode where he goes, I wish I had no bones, and then he just turned into a blob of fat on the ground, right? That's going to be you if you didn't have bones. So in your writing, in your art, you're going to have structure being put into this chaos. Now, some people, they do this at the same time. It's possible to have an outline first, and then the raw, rough draft second, right? But I don't consider it that way. And think of it like this. If you're going to have raw ideas being put into an outline, you usually try to edit your outline as well. Your outline's a separate work than your actual story. Your outline is just the story, but not being told as a story. It's being told to yourself. So I wouldn't consider an outline part of this equation. I would consider the actual process of writing this actual equation. Outline is separate than the story. They're just two different sides of the same coin. If that makes sense. It's like having a piece written, and you're also trying to translate your own outline to yourself. I'm pretty sure some people, they've like seen some outlines and they're like, wait a minute, what the fuck was I trying to say with that one? That happens to me all the time. So you have albedo, which is the bare bones, the whitening. White as the teeth of people on a toothpaste commercial, right? Blinding white. It's always a black lady in those toothpaste commercials, isn't it? I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's a wonderful thing that they're able to have such a beautiful smile. But goddamn it, isn't that obvious that in those commercials it's always a black woman? And they always wear a white t-shirt too. What the the fuck is up with those commercials? So following the chaos, you get purification, and you're bringing light and clarity into the matter at hand, the first matter. So what is this when you are making art? This is you editing. This is you making sense of the whole thing. Some people can even consider this as the theme creation part, where you have a raw idea and you're like, how can I make a sense of this? How can I enlighten people on a particular subject? Well, this is where the theme comes in. This is where the main message comes in. What am I trying to tell people? Well, your main message better be clear and it better be bright. It's the whole light that illuminates the entire story. It's the whole thing that keeps it all together. It's the fire up in the sky. The stars up in the sky. That's shining down upon the air, the water, and the earth, right? So you do have to separate this purification. You have to remove all the crudeness from it. And that's when you're editing away a bunch of sentences didn't make sense, a bunch of words didn't matter, digressions, filler, take that all away. You're trying to refine it to the audience, the particular audience that you want to tell it to. And you're trying to send them a particular message. You're like, yo, this is what you're going to listen to. I got something for you. That's what you're telling your audience. And it's a directed audience, not an audience you're begging for, the audience you really, really want to tell, because that's who you're directing it as. That's who you're directing it at. So what comes after the purification? Well, after that, you got Citrinitas. And I don't know what the fuck the Greek word is. It says Xanthosis? Xanthosis? Dude, who the hell was speaking Greek back then? Why do they have so many X's? Or are they Chinese? So, Citrinitas is the yellowness. It means yellow. Oh, of course I said Chinese and I'm talking about yellow. Oh no, I'm going to be canceled like Lindsay Ellis. People are going to compare me to genocide. Genocide of women. Go ahead. Twitter, do your best. Do your worst. So this is the third stage. So what do you have happen after you purify it? Well, you purified it yourself, didn't you? Citrinus. I'm sorry, I keep saying Citrinus. I'm sorry. It's Citrinitas. Citrinitas. It's the dawning of the solar light, inherent in one's being, and that the reflective of lunar or soul light was no longer necessary. What this means is that in your own work, you're going to have a yellowing. Something else shines a light on it. What do you think shines a light on your work? What do you think that is? It's beta readers. It's other opinions, reviews, other ideas, other things you can compare it to. Imagine every single work around your particular work. The genre has a whole bunch of other titles in there, right? You have to compare yourself to others. You really do. People go, I don't want to compare myself to others. No, compare yourself to others. How much light is there? Are you being outshined? Or are you in the dark? Are you the only light there? How many stars are around you? What kind of constellation are you part of? Well, that was fucking deep. But you know what I mean. What can you compare yourself to? And how can you relate to the reader in that way? This is why, for example, Axiom's End from Lindsay Ellis, she compared herself to two books, or two titles, The Arrival and Stranger Things. She fucking lied, but she compared herself to them either way. She thought that these are two lights that were going to be shining on her book. Two things that she can compare herself to. She thought she was part of the Stranger Things and The Arrival constellation, right? She thought she was part of the Big Dipper or the Big Bear, whatever I don't know my constellations, I'm sorry. Sagittarius, what the fuck? Serpentinus, whatever the fuck constellations there are. Is Orion a constellation? Probably. She thought she was part of Orion's belt, alright? She wasn't. She was over there in the corner, somewhere else. She was like that lone star. Sure, she shines by herself, but who the fuck's looking at it? So that's the yellowness. Yellowness means light. It's like a sun. Imagine the sun, basically, okay? Just imagine the sun being bright, and this is the spotlight. This is the spotlight that your story's in. This is the part where everybody's going to be saying, hey, you fucked up here, you fucked up there, or... So this is like a reviewing stage. Whether it's before you release it or after, people are going to be reviewing it. You're going to get other opinions, and you're going to be reviewing it yourself. Even if you already edited everything you could, you're still going to be comparing it to other things. You're going to be trying to compare it to things that people within a particular culture can relate to. You have to do that, because if you can't, you're not saying anything. How can people relate to it if they can't understand any of it? You have to think about that. How is a person going to relate to it? Well, fuck. Beta readers are kind of important, isn't it? And this doesn't mean get any kind of beta reader, any kind of audience, anybody. You know, don't get your mom and dad involved, whoever, your sister, brother, somebody who's going to be nice to you. You have to get somebody who's hardcore, somebody who's going to be honest, and also more or less related to the audience you're trying to appeal to. I hate to say it, but most people aren't like that. You're not going to find many people who can actually relate to the work you're trying to make, the audience you're trying to appeal to. You're not going to find many people who can actually be that person who can also tell you what you did wrong. It's a harsh truth, but that's what happens. You're going to get somebody who's interested in art in general, but it's their particular form that they want to tell you how to make, right? Sounds selfish, but that's what everybody does. I don't like particular things. You don't like particular things. Are we going to like the same thing? Most likely not. Can we agree on certain things? Sure, why not? But not everything, right? If we agreed on everything, then we wouldn't be individuals. Who the fuck wants that kind of world? Oh, I know. Me, I know. The communists. Well, who the fuck are they? Can't even make a goddamn country like certain people. Oh, Jesus. And that's why Citrinitas is also compared in psychology as the wise old man or the wise old woman, as an archetype. It's not actually you yet. It's not you there. This is the wisdom. This is the wisdom part. First you had the composing, you had the chaos, then you had the order, the structure that was going to be putting it all together. Now you have the wisdom. You have to have wisdom. Wisdom is about being able to relate to other things around you. Intelligence is to know what something is, but wisdom is about how you can actually utilize it, how you can use it, how you can understand it. Sure, you may have intelligence in some kind of particular field, but do you actually know how to use that intelligence? No. Most of the time, you don't. If you have low wisdom, if you have high wisdom, okay, fine, you can do whatever the fuck you want, even if you have a small amount of intelligence. That's why, there's actually a thing called Mad Monk, or I think it's called Mad Monk, and it's like somebody who has like ridiculously low intelligence but super high wisdom, like I guess that's what what's his name? What's that movie? Forrest Gump, that's it. That's what Forrest Gump is all about. That's what that movie with Bobby Boucher. What the fuck is that movie? Waterboy? Any Adam Sandler movie, basically, where he plays like as a retard who is supposed to be lovable. And technically he's wise, but he's not. That's the Mad Monk. But that's another subject. So Trinitas is the wisdom stage. It's a part where you have other people bring you wisdom, or you can bring your own wisdom. But wisdom has to be able to relate to things, and also to communicate well. So not only are you making your perfect structure, but you're also trying to communicate it well to other people, allowing them to relate to you. And finally, we come down to rubido, the reddening, or iosis. I guess io means red? Holy shit, that's a weird word. So rubido is redness, but In Greek, they call it iosis, which means the process by which a material becomes gold. And gold is a big symbol. Gold relates to the sun, but also gold is value, it's worth, it's something that people desire. It's just, I guess you can consider it something like both enlightenment and that which humans desire that can benefit them. And that's what art pretty much is trying to aim to be. Something that can benefit somebody in a particular way. I mean, we seek out the art, don't we? That's what marketing is about. We see something marketing towards us, and then we seek it. We wish to know what's in it. We wish to know what's happening. Sometimes it feels like it's really complicated what I'm trying to tell you, but this is very basic nonsense. This is... No, I don't want to call it nonsense. This is very basic stuff. This is so basic that it happens in milliseconds, beyond milliseconds. You know, it's happening instantly in your head. This entire process, everything. It's happening when you don't even realize it. If you're not conscious of it, if you don't think of it, you're not even going to notice it. That's how basic this is. And that's what alchemy is. It's the most basic thing possible being explained through symbols. And most people can't even understand it, even though they have it just explained very plainly to them like I'm doing. I hope that most of you understand what I'm saying through this whole entire podcast, but I feel like a good chunk of you who are not my fans, you're not going to understand anything I'm saying. You're going to think, oh, what the hell is he on about? Bunch of baloney, this monk. Bunch of baloney, this mook. So you're making gold. Your gold is a finished product. Your gold is the Philosopher's Stone. Your gold is the goal. It's your desire. It's what people desire as well. It's what makes you money. Think of it like that. Think gold money. So when you are making gold, you're making money from your work. You make money from your work by entering rubido. Rubido is the final stage. That's a signal of success. It's not part of the process anymore. It's the end of the process. It's not where it's beginning. It's not gonna, you don't really have to actually do anything with it. It's like you're waiting. You're waiting for the gold to appear, the money to appear. This is the sense, this is the sign that you have success when you enter rubido. It says here that the rubido stage entails the attempt of the alchemist to integrate the psycho-spiritual outcomes of the process into a coherent sense of self before its re-entry into the world. Okay, so think of it like this also. Rubido also relates to blood, relates to a crowned king, relates to a phoenix. So a phoenix revives itself from the ashes. A phoenix is the perfect symbol for art because you have ashes. Something else died, something else ended, and now a new life is born from the ashes of the previous. So when you're making your art, you're taking something previously that you witnessed, that you saw, you experienced, and you're taking this. I'm pretty sure the phoenix grows from fire, right? The ashes burst into flames, and then another phoenix is born. So you have the fire, and then you result in a new phoenix. And this new phoenix is the rubido. When you have blood, blood is the thing that pumps through the human to keep it alive, right? Is what your heart is there for. Blood brings the air to your brain. So as long as there's blood, there's life. So this is like the life of your work, the life of your art. And if the life is fruitful, fertile, it's going to give you a lot of gold, isn't it? And that depends on how you utilize it. More people see it, more people buy it. How much you want to charge for it, if people are willing to pay you that much. How much people are going to give to you based on how well you are at this alchemical process. That's the rubido. In psychology, it's also the self. So once you become I don't think it means individual. The self in Jungian philosophy, it means like wholeness. So the self is like the entire thing, the entire result of something. So the self is like a connection between body, soul, and spirit, or you can consider it body, mind, and soul, or body, mind, and spirit. So the soul is like your mind, the body is your physical presence, and then the spirit is like that which is beyond you in the metaphysical realm. And so when you have rubido, you have a diminished sense of inner conflict. There's almost no conflict within. Everything's good. Everything's fine. That's rubido. That's the rubido stage. Now, how can you enter the rubido stage with your art? How do you do that? Well, that's the hard part for many people. And you can't do that until you got past the albedo stage, got past the trinitas, and got past negrido. You had to get past all of those to enter rubido, and that's when you become a success. That's when you get the gold. That's when you get the Philosopher's Stone, the elixir of life. You bring life into your story. So I know I'm saying a lot of things at once, but I'm both talking about your process as an artist and then your finished product. Both of these have the 4 stages. You as an artist have 4 stages. You're learning, you're taking things from other culture, you're taking things from cultures, taking things from other works, and then you're trying to purify it into a form that you can think of as in your idea. And then you have the Citrinitas stage where you're trying to illuminate it and compare it to other things. And then you have your finished product, right? So when it's yourself, as an artist, you have the things that you're taking from other cultures and other people. Then you are refining your particular voice, right? And then you compare yourself to other people to see how far you've gone. And then at the end, you determine through rubido if you are successful or not. Successful in the sense of you made enough works, you made things work enough, if you're a good artist or not. If you have the ability to gain the gold you wished. Right? Maybe you're going to get a little bit, who knows? But you could also get a lot if you refine yourself better. So that's the thing. When you are an artist, you had to also enter the stage of the great work. You as an artist are also the great work. You are also a magnum opus. Not just your magnum opus you're creating as your art, but you as an artist are also a magnum opus. And that's why you also have to kind of think of the psychology aspect of it. Your body is not only a temple. Your body is also a work of art. Your brain's a work of art. So you had to use alchemy to refine both of them, and also your art that you're making. Well, that was a lot taken, wasn't it? It was fun, it was long, and dare I say it, it was enjoyable. And so was the podcast. I don't know what I'm going to do for next time. I actually forgot to plan the next one. Yeah, so after talking about alchemy and how to make yourself better, I thought that next episode I would talk about what makes your storytelling worse, because I guess me being triggered and freaking out about things that I hate, or things that I don't like, I think that's a little bit more entertaining. So this one was very informational, very informative. It was all about teaching. Next episode is going to be full-blown entertainment, where I talk about cultural appropriation and woke racism. I hope you don't miss that one, because that one's going to be a doozy. It's terrible what they're doing with culture these days. And cultural appropriation is the dumbest concept out there. Wokeness is the dumbest thing out there. I'm going to explain all those and more in the next episode. Next time. So, till next time.